when investors are pretty certain about who's going to win the election, some of the stock ideas, the investment ideas, get baked in well ahead of the election.
If you buy a good business, it doesn't really matter who's going to win, who's the president. Like good businesses, they do well in Republican presidencies or like Democratic presidencies. And, politicians argue, but profits don't care.
On this episode of Early Bird, we take a look at what stocks could perform well depending on whether Donald Trump or Kamala Harris wins the U.S. presidential election. If you're an investor looking to stay on top of the latest market trends, then you're listening to the right podcast. This is Early Bird, and I'm your host, Stephen Lerner. Before we get to today's discussion, let me tell you how you can save time and beat the market through Early Bird, a free daily email newsletter featuring commentary about the latest trends in stocks, cryptocurrency, and equity crowdfunding. Early Bird is designed to help individual and non-professional investors stay on top of all of the critical investing trends. The newsletter is 100% free and is sent to your email box each weekday morning. Subscribe to Early Bird for free at www.earlybird.email. Once again, that's earlybird.email. And now, today's discussion. First, we welcome Brian Huckstep, Chief Investment Officer for Advyzon Investment Management. All right, Brian, welcome to the Early Bird podcast. How are you doing today?
Doing terrific. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us, Brian. We are talking about the upcoming 2024 U.S. presidential election and its impact on the stock market. Right now, it's right before the election, and we don't know who is actually going to win. So we're trying to figure out how this might impact the stock market. Brian, you were telling me just before we got started that this election and its relationship to the stock market might be a bit unique. Why is that?
Well, I've been through a few elections now. I've been working with investing 32 years, so seen a few elections and seen the impact on markets and studied history also. And what we find is that when investors are pretty certain about who's going to win the election, some of the stock ideas, the investment ideas, get baked in well ahead of the election. And I think one terrific new tool we have these days to help us with that as investors are some of the wagering websites that you can go look at. You don't even have to have a login. You can check some of these sites out and they'll give you the probabilities. These are sites where people are actually betting real money. So often these sites give us a real insight into what people are thinking. It's not some kind of poll that might have a slant. This is real money. And so when you check out these websites and you look at historical trends of the prices of the candidates, and they always a slightly different way to communicate that data. But you can see that until recently, the election this year was really, really tight, 50-50 until a few weeks ago. And then it started splitting and we had Trump pull ahead a little bit. And so some of those investment ideas are getting baked in. So when it's the case in an election, although we still are pretty uncertain about who's going to win, when you're uncertain, you can really get some knee-jerk reactions the day after the election. And when you have high certainty before the election, those things get baked in, and we often don't see much reaction at all.
No, you're right. That's typically what happens, and that's what makes this setup so interesting in 2024. So, Brian, let's get into it. If President Trump were to win in this upcoming election, win again as president, what stocks do you think might benefit and that investors should look at?
So at Advyzon Investment Management, we generally invest in broad trends. We're top-down investors. So we don't pick individual stocks per se, but we pick more sectors and asset classes and regions, and we do some stock tilting. But the first comment I'll have is that international stocks. We are underweighting international stocks based on the very kind of recent bias toward President Trump winning. So if he wins and tariffs happen, it will be detrimental to profits for non-U.S. companies indirectly. So we think that they'll sell less. Their profits will be hurt and their prices will go down. But additionally, there may be some barriers to investing put on. We've seen this kind of thing in China where they have kind of multiple classes of investing. So in retaliation, we suspect some countries may actually make it harder for U.S. investors to earn a profit in those regions. So it's kind of a two-part impact that we're reducing our international stocks. So that's just pretty much across the board. Now, there may be some regions of the world where we're a little bit more, better trade partners. Maybe Europe, maybe some of the, Canada, Mexico, close countries. So we expect to see some different levels of friendliness toward foreign countries impact those regions differently.
Oh, interesting. What could happen there? Does this include U.S.-based companies that do business overseas? Could they be impacted as well by a Trump victory?
Absolutely. Yeah. When Tesla sells cars outside the U.S., Tesla is very much a U.S. company. Easily, any kind of retaliatory penalties put on sales of U.S. goods overseas will impact our profits for these U.S. companies. So when we split up companies on the exchanges, so many companies are global these days, more than ever. Globalization's just been, thriving and helping these multinational companies in the U.S. and outside the U.S. to sell to us, that there's so much cross current selling, and not just selling, but sourcing of expenses. So when we buy things like GM buys parts, a lot of parts made in Canada, Mexico, you can see that on the tag of your window when you go look at a new car these days, the percent made outside the U.S. It's a multi-part thing. And so not just sales, but the input costs for things done outside the U.S. will go up. So that will impact the stocks from the top line and the middle, the costs, and it'll all roll right down in the negative way to the bottom line.
Oh, wow. So international stocks, this could be a problem if there is a Trump victory. Do you have any, predictions about other stocks that might do well if there is a Trump victory for this election?
Certainly. Any kind of weapons-related companies. When you listen to some of the rhetoric from Democrats about trying to put limitations on weapons, that is negative for a lot of companies that produce those things. And if Trump gets back into office, a lot of those fears will be ameliorated, and we expect those stocks to go up a little bit. So if you do have confidence in a Trump win, you might buy some of those outdoor type goods stocks. And if you do suspect a Harris win, it may or may not go through. But as an investor, we use kind of an option pricing mentality and put a percentage on the positive case and a percentage on the negative case and multiply those to try to come up with our best median weighted stock price for each sector and stock. So all else equal, if we see Trump take the White House, we should see those kinds of weapons makers stock prices improve from where they're at today.
Understood. So you're talking about like guns and ammunition producers, correct?
Guns and ammo, right. Any company related to that kind of thing. So yes, if you wanted to do broadly and bet on some of these trends, ESG products and ETFs. So I'm very familiar with a lot of ETFs, spent a lot of time investing in those. There are a couple hundred ESG related ETFs that I suspect will not do as well under a Trump White House, but will do well under a Harris White House. So that's one way to play that idea.
Got it. If Vice President Harris were to win in this election, what sort of stocks do you think investors should look at in this case?
So I have some ideas, but I'm gonna first say, Harris is we expect a lot of the same investing ideas that Biden had. So we don't expect big changes. But the thing is, my very first comment at the start of our conversation about stocks kind of front running ideas, I've seen one of my favorite ETFs here for this idea is TAN. It's an Invesco solar ETF, and it holds solar related or renewable energy related stocks. And so, with that ticker TAN, I've been watching this for the last couple of months. Every day that the Democrat the probability of a Democrat taking the White House goes up, that ETF goes up every day. The probability of a Republican getting the White House goes up, that stock goes down. And it's pretty clear to see the correlation that if Trump takes the White House, he isn't going to be maybe as friendly to some of the renewable energy ideas as Harris might be. So although Harris really is an extension of Biden, I don't know that we're going to get a lot more of these subsidies for these kinds of companies, but we won't see them come down, almost certainly. So for that reason, we should expect something like that ETF that's a broad, diversified we should expect to see that go up, just as kind of a sigh of relief to say, okay, phew, we're going to keep our subsidies and all the kind of benefits that come with a friendly environmental administration.
Oh, that makes total sense. That ETF, especially in that scenario. Real quick, a Harris victory for this election. What stocks or what sectors could be in trouble?
Banking could be in trouble. Regulations. Under Trump, we might expect to see some regulations ease. Under Harris, you don't plan to see that. So financials might just get a little bit of a knock. Energy is a weird one. Energy, based on supply and demand, a lot of people knee-jerk think that you might want to bet against energy if Harris took office. But the actual working through the supply and demand factors is pretty complex there. So if Harris comes into office, they're not going to open up new energy production. And like I said, the renewable energy is going to do well. But you can find some energy related stocks that if energy supply is kept low, that's good for them. Because what that means is that with supply and demand, if supply stays low, price stays high. So if you have large multinational incumbent energy producers like Exxon, Chevron, Phillips, those energy producers benefit from a high energy price, and that price stays higher if supply stays lower. So it's really kind of counterintuitive to what I think a lot of people's knee-jerk reaction is. So a lot of people would just say, oh, Trump's friendly to energy, let's bet on energy companies. But more nuance than that based on supply and demand. When we see supply expand, you see price go down. And those large existing energy producers have a hard time then making a profit. I'm sure their costs go down to produce, but so does the top line, the revenue. So when you work through the margin and the end earnings per share, a Harris presidency can be good for those largest energy producers. Now, the smaller ones where there are energy producers that benefit from a lower production price, and they can only turn a profit at all if production prices are lower, they might benefit from a Trump presidency. So it's really kind of nuanced where the small ones who have a tough time squeezing a profit based on supply or price and cost, they'll do well, but the big ones might not under Trump. So Harris might actually be good for large energy producers.
Oh, wow. That's a detailed point. We'll have to see how the stock market reacts after the election. We'll see which of these stocks, sectors, ETFs bounce or drop after whoever wins the election. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. When we return, we'll hear about specific stocks to buy based on the outcome of the election. But first, let me tell you how you can become a more informed investor through Early Bird, a free daily email newsletter. Early Bird has commentary on the latest events and trends in stocks, cryptocurrency, and crowdfunding. With Early Bird's daily weekday email, investors can quickly stay on top of the trends and beat the market. Subscribe to Early Bird for free at www.earlybird.email. Once again, that's earlybird.email. And now, back to today's discussion. We now welcome David Materazzi, CEO at Galileo FX. All right, David, welcome to the Early Bird Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks, Stephen. How are you doing?
Doing great. We're in this episode talking about the upcoming presidential election and what it could mean for stocks, which stocks or sectors will perform well depending on who wins this election. But before we do that, briefly, David, just to give us some context, what should investors know about the impact of elections on stocks?
Okay, so let's start with the disclaimer, right? Nothing I'm going to say is financial advice. So these are just my views. We have to get that out of the way. But first of all, nobody knows who's going to become president, right? Not even Trump or Kamala. So the outcome of the election is unpredictable. We have to acknowledge that, even if it may look like obvious, but it's not. Okay. So there is a lot of emotions, lots of emotions are going on, and we're going to see that in the markets as well. So especially in the short term, you're going to see a lot of, volatility in the market. People try to predict the outcome of the election with polls, but polls are not reliable, and there are like plenty of examples of both accurate and inaccurate predictions with polls. So we can't really rely on polls. And betting sites, have drawn a lot of attention recently, but they too, they have been right and wrong in past elections. So presidents come and go, but good businesses keep making money. So we have to keep that in mind. If you buy a good business, it doesn't really matter who's going to win, who's the president. Like good businesses, they do well in Republican presidencies or like Democratic presidencies. And, politicians argue, but profits don't care. That's what people say on Wall Street, right?
Good point.
Trump's policies, let's see, the sectors, right? So because the two candidates, they have very different economic policies, and they're going to affect different sectors, right? So Trump's policies, I think, in my opinion, they're going to boost areas like oil and gas, big banks, American-made cars, defense, and definitely tech for government, right? Tech for government security. So it's all about fewer rules and putting American first, right? So that's his program. Kamala Harris, right, on the other hand, she focuses on clean energy, electric cars, affordable homes, and healthcare access. So that's what we know from their program. So her priorities are more like going green, expanding healthcare. So to find the stocks that you would buy if you believe that Trump is going to win or Kamala is going to win, we have to look at their policies, which sectors the policies affect, and then we're going to pick some good stocks in those sectors. And that's what I did. So each has a different focus that affects and influences different industries and leaves others out, right?
Yeah, so let's get into it. If Trump is victorious with this upcoming election, what are some stocks that you think could do well?
So definitely energy. I will start with that, oil and gas. And the big player here is Exxon. The stock is priced at $115. The symbol is XOM. And it's a major oil and gas company. I mean, everybody knows Exxon, right? And Trump has plans for this U.S. oil production, and that's a big win for Exxon. And the cuts to regulations, it means also that Exxon is going to save more money and is going to drill more. So imagine Trump giving Exxon like a clear road without any obstacle, fewer rules, lower costs, lower taxes. That means more money for Exxon. So that's why I'm bullish on this stock, right? Trump wants America to rely on its own oil. He doesn't want to import oil, right? So Exxon can deliver that. So that's the first stock that I would pick, if Trump wins, right? The second one is in the big banks industry. And the giant here is JP Morgan, this the leading U.S. bank. The stock is priced at around $222. The symbol is JPM. And Trump, his policies, they favor big banks. And JP Morgan is definitely one of the biggest, right? They don't need any publicity. So with fewer banking rules, you're going to see more freedom. So these banks, they're going to have more freedom to grow, and lower taxes also, they're going to affect their bottom line. So they have more freedom, lower taxes under Trump. Trump is more like business friendly with banks and with large businesses. So it creates more loan demand as well for JP Morgan. So that's another gain for JP Morgan, right? More business activity means more loans, which means more money for JP Morgan and banks in general, right?
Yeah.
So it's a powerful machine. JP Morgan is a powerful machine, and now it's gonna run even faster.
Interesting. So these are two stocks, two big name stocks for sure, Exxon and JPM you mentioned, that you think could benefit if Trump wins. Let's flip sides here real quick. If Harris wins the election on Tuesday, what are some stocks that you think could be poised for a big breakout?
So definitely, Harris, she's all about this green energy, renewables. So definitely the big player here is NextEra. The stock is priced at $77. Stock symbol is NEE, and is a big player in the solar and wind energy. So the green energy push of Kamala Harris is perfect for NextEra. She's all about wind and solar, and NextEra they do both. They do both wind and solar. So she wants to give them like the industry tax breaks, and that's gonna cut cost for NextEra projects. So that's another big gain for the stock. Plus the federal funds, they bring steady work for companies like this, so more security for the long term. And so under Harris, definitely NextEra, it can become even the main power source in the US. It has that ambition, right? The second stock that I would say, even if some people may not agree, it's Tesla. Let's leave like politics aside. Elon Musk, we know he supports Trump, is a big donor with his PAC, but let's leave that aside. Tesla, I think, is gonna lead in an Harris term. Why? Because Tesla is the leader in the electric cars and EV tech, right? So Harris, she's pushing for electric vehicles, and that's great news for Tesla, right? And she's gonna give this industry tax breaks, so Tesla can make cheaper cars. So Tesla can make cheaper cars, and demand is gonna rise, right? So you're gonna see more demand for Tesla cars. And Harris also, she wants more charging stations. So that makes owning a Tesla car easier. So definitely it's gonna benefit the company and the stock. But this is a very risky stock. It's a very volatile stock, Tesla. I would recommend a lot of research, and knowing what you're doing. The other stocks I recommended, I feel they're more like, stable in the long term. If you look at the past data, but Tesla, it's a peculiar kind of stock.
Yeah. I mean, two interesting stocks, NextEra and Tesla. I wasn't expecting that. Quick, a few points. I know our listeners know, always speak to a financial advisor before making these decisions to figure out what's best for you. Keep an eye on all of these stocks mentioned on the episode. Who knows what will happen in the breakout? David, real quick, if you could summarize everything investors should keep an eye on for with this election on Tuesday and then in the days after, what should investors watch out for in general?
So first thing, don't make the mistake of panicking. If you see big swings in the market, that's gonna stop. It's like just like a short-term effect of the elections. They focus on the long term. Long term in this case means like at least a year, right? So wait for things to stabilize. I see people all the time getting emotional and making rushing decisions, and that's really bad for investing, right? So don't let anything that happens, don't let it screw up your strategy. Just stick to your strategy. Buy stocks that you feel that you understand what you are buying, you understand the company, the products, you like it, and you feel that the company is going to do well in the future, whether Trump wins or Kamala wins. So take these elections as like potential signals for some stocks, but don't focus too much on that for your investment decisions. That would be my advice.
Thank you again to Brian Huckstep and David Materazzi for sharing your insights on the election. And thank you to everyone for listening to today's discussion. We'll be back next week for another episode of Early Bird. Have a great day.